afternoon. Welcome back to Law Power Hour. Last week we had Bill Proctor and Ken Winemko on, and this week Ken has agreed to rejoin us to talk about his innocence. And last week when we talked about his innocence and how he was able to prove his innocence after being incarcerated at Jackson Prison for 10 and a half years, we didn't really have an opportunity to get into the fine points that I think are really important to understand about proving innocence. As you know, Mr. Proctor is an investigative reporter, and he has a program called Proving Innocence. And Ken, thank you for coming. You work with Mr. Proctor on that, don't you?
Yes, I do. It's an honor for me to work with Bill. He's such a good friend of mine and such an advocate for the cause that we're all trying to pursue, that would provide justice for all.
Since you were here last time, I understand you folks provided us with a short video. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, there's a short video. I believe it's going to show myself the day I was released from prison. And there might be another short clip from a mini documentary that was made about my case that actually won an Emmy Award. And the clip should include shots of Julie Balmer, who was wrongfully imprisoned for 5 years for a crime that was never committed. It was a shaken baby syndrome case, happened out of Macomb County, and Julie was proven innocent with the help of Carl Marlinga, who is now a judge in Macomb County, as well as David Moran, who is the executive director and founder of the Michigan Innocence Clinic at the U of M.
Okay, let's see if we can get to that video right now.
I lost almost 10 years of my life. I had my name dragged through the mud. I was called a menace to society, and I seriously considered hanging myself. When I heard those words, guilty, I felt like somebody hit me with a stun gun.
Believe it or not, Ken Winemko was living out a nightmare that he never imagined. Convicted in 1994 for the brutal rape and robbery of a 28-year-old Clinton Township woman, Winemko was sentenced to 40 to 60 years in prison for a crime he knew he did not commit.
I couldn't understand how something like this could happen in our system. He said I failed to show remorse. My response to him was, Your Honor, I feel terrible for what happened to this woman, but I can't show remorse for something I didn't do or have any knowledge of.
Samples of his blood, hair, semen, and saliva were compared to those collected at the crime scene and eliminated him as a suspect.
I thought I actually died and I was in hell. They had the wrong man. I'm innocent.
In a 5-year span, Ken's appeals were denied by both Michigan and federal courts. He was beginning to lose hope that his case would be overturned. Then, in 1999, he decided he would turn to an unlikely source for help.
It's not uncommon to receive letters from prisoners, and usually it's just kind of like, yes, everyone's innocent. The police department claimed that, other people have checked this out. They've all found out it's, a waste of time. Don't waste your time, Kim. And I said, well, I'd like to look for myself. I don't think he should be here. I really don't think he should be here.
So maybe you want to explain to our listeners what this video was all about.
Well, the video was a short documentary made about my case in particular. The video was entitled The Price of Innocence, the Wrongful Conviction of Ken Winemko. And I'm very happy that we were able to have that show produced. It was nominated for 3 Emmy Awards, and ironically on June 17th of 2006, which was the 3rd anniversary of my walking out of prison, the ceremonies were held at the Rock Financial Center in Novi, and we actually won 1 Emmy, Barry.
Now, as I understand it, you had the benefit of some really fine lawyers who represented you in front of Judge Zatkoff. Is that correct?
I did. I think they're some of the 2 of the finest attorneys that I've ever met. Their reputations speak for themselves. And those two attorneys were Mr. George Gugasian and Thomas Howlett of the Gugasian firm in Bloomfield Hills. I can't speak enough about them. They are just the best.
Now, you and I know how difficult it is to win a 1983 case when you're suing the government.
Right.
And Judge Zadkoff has a reputation for being a pretty tough judge, doesn't he?
He does, and I can recall, Barry, when the case was assigned to Judge Zadkoff, the attorneys for the defendants that I was suing were actually laughing at us because of Judge Zadkoff's reputation as being a law and order judge. But I had, I believed, since I was home, the truth was proven. I was regaining faith in the system, and Judge Zadkoff, he did the right thing. He's a very, very good man. I'm sorry that he's no longer with us, but he's another judge who is the epitome of what anyone who sits on a bench should be, I believe, in my opinion.
I don't know if you knew this, but Judge Zadkoff came out of Macomb County.
I know. I was aware of that, yeah.
And I attended law school with Judge Zadkoff.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Yeah, he was a very, very good man, and I can't speak enough about him. And I can recall, Barry, during the course of my suit, and as you said, most of the 1983 lawsuits are not successful, especially in exonerations. I think the percentage is only like 32%.
That's true. Now, you were exonerated, you sued, you recovered monies, correct?
Correct. In federal court, yes.
Right. And that was to pay you for your damages for being incarcerated for 10 and a half years, correct?
That's correct. Absolutely correct.
And now you're out there, and you've been out there for several years now, trying to get compensation laws passed for innocent victims who've been detained or incarcerated, correct?
Correct. In the state of Michigan. The state of 30 states currently have provisions that would provide state-paid compensation in some fashion, along with the District of Columbia. 30 states plus D.C. Michigan is one of the 20 states that does not offer a penny of compensation to anyone, such as myself or my fellow exonerees around the state, for serving sometimes decades in prison for something they never did.
Now, on the federal level, however, there is compensation, isn't there?
Yes, there is. There is on the federal side, but in federal court and state court, there are two different venues. It could be two sets of defendants. The rules could be a little bit different, but what is needed and what I've been fighting for the last 9 years is to provide help for my fellow exonerees here in Michigan from all 83 counties. So I've dedicated my life to trying to make life a little bit better and get these people back on the right track.
Now, the Michigan compensation legislation has passed the Michigan Senate.
That's correct. It passed about 6 weeks ago. It passed the Michigan Senate by a unanimous vote. I still can't believe it to this day because we were getting so much feedback from the Republicans. They were against it. But I had a meeting with Senator Rick Jones and Senator Mike Kowal, and we sat down along with Senator Bita, who sponsored the bill originally, and Representative Stephanie Chang from Detroit, and we convinced them that it's the right thing to do.
So it's in the House now, right?
It's in the House. Hopefully we will get a vote, a positive vote, sometime next week, right after Labor Day.
Now, if this legislation passes, one of the things that's disturbing and distressing to you about this legislation is that there's a provision in the legislation which would require that any monies you receive in a lawsuit in federal court reduce the amount of compensation that you're entitled to receive through the state. Is that correct?
That's correct. And to me, that makes no sense whatsoever. As I just stated, federal law and federal court and state court are two different things, okay? And if you look at it in reality, Barry, think about this. Let's say someone receives state compensation today, 6 months down the road, their case, they file a suit in federal court, they happen to win $1 million, okay, for a round number. Now, and from the state, they're paid $500,000. Well, now that after the state pays them $500,000, they get the $1 million from a federal court. The state wants that person to pay back the $500,000 to the state of Michigan. In reality, this is what it tells me. The state is saying, okay, we were wrong. Here is your $500,000 for serving 10 years in prison. But we want our money back. So they're saying, yeah, we were wrong, but still, we still want our money back.
Okay.
Makes no sense.
Let's take a break for a minute. We're going to dissect this. We're going to take it apart, and we're going to explain the differences in the types of damages.
Okay.
And let our listeners call in if they have questions about this.
Sounds great.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
Okay, so you go to federal court and you recover money, you get a judgment, you get compensated, and now you come back to the state of Michigan, they change the law, or they enact new laws, and you want to get compensated, correct?
Correct.
There's a difference between the recoveries, though, isn't there?
Well, the biggest difference, Barry, is that the state, in my opinion, is not entitled to get their money back from someone who has been successful in a different venue.
Okay.
And
When you sue in federal court, you're making a claim for emotional distress, being detained, denied the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness under the United States Constitution, right?
right, you're denied. You're denied your constitutional rights under the United States Constitution. That's correct.
Okay. When you sue, or you make a claim under the proposed legislation, you're asking to be compensated on an annual basis for being denied the right to go to work, to earn a living, to maintain yourself, your family, correct?
That's one of the reasons. That's correct. Another reason is for the pain and suffering that everyone has to go through for spending 10, 20, 30 years in prison for something you didn't do.
Okay.
And I often make the comparison to an Army veteran, and I love each and every person that serves in our armed forces. My father served in World War II. My son enlisted when I was still wrongfully incarcerated. But these our men and women in the armed forces, they go through hell being in war. Oftentimes they go through post-traumatic stress syndrome, which is exactly the same thing that an innocent person goes through when they're not only when they're in prison, but after they are released. To this day, I'm not ashamed to admit this, Barry, because I'm a very strong-willed person. But to this day, at times, I still have nightmares about seeing what I saw in prison.
Okay. But here's my rub with it. Here's my concern. You're detained from society for 10 and a half years, and you have a right to sue.
That's correct.
But the people who are responsible for you being detained from society, They're not receiving any punishment, are they?
No, and that part really bothers me, and a lot of that has to do with the people responsible for putting an innocent person in prison. They will always claim immunity. To me, that's a real sore point for me, Barry. I believe the law, the way I was taught when I was in school, the law should apply equally to everyone. Black, white, man, woman, to me it doesn't matter. That's what America is supposed to be
We're
about.
talking about even-handed treatment.
Absolutely.
Okay, but
Absolutely.
here's the problem. That detective who hid the evidence in your case, is he still working?
Well, he deceased. He's deceased now. But I'll tell you this for a fact. The two detectives who were responsible for hiding the evidence in my case, right after I was convicted, they were promoted. The lieutenant in charge of the case was promoted to the chief of police.
So there was no punishment.
No, and the only way, in my opinion, the only way these wrongful convictions are going to stop is when the law is applied equally. If it's proven in court that an officer of the law or a judge or a prosecutor who takes an oath to uphold the law, if they break the law, they should face the same circumstances that someone like myself or my fellow exonerees have to face.
And you told us last week about a prosecutor who made a deal with a snitch in jail. You called him a snitch.
Right.
Who knew nothing about you, but who claimed he knew everything about you.
Right. And that was due. And again, this is all, ladies and gentlemen, this is all part of, it's been proven in federal court. The prosecutor, assistant prosecutor who handled my case, found a jailhouse snitch. This man was facing life in prison as a fourth habitual offender. Barry. The prosecutor and the lead detective took him out of the Macomb County Jail, took him back to the Clinton Township Police Department, put him into an interrogation room. They threw their police reports on a table in front of him, and they told him that they were going to go out to lunch for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and when they come back from lunch, if he wasn't willing to get on a stand and testify to what they had in their reports, they guaranteed him I would never see the light of day. And to go a little bit farther on that, during the course of the trial, when the assistant prosecutor put this man on the stand, she told the jury that she's going to give this man the quote unquote, the deal of the century, that if he gets on the stand and testifies that I told him I committed the rape, they would drop all the charges pending against him. He could walk away from a life sentence.
Okay, well, she made a full disclosure, at least to the jury, didn't she?
Well, sure, but she wasn't telling the truth.
Well, that's another issue. But she made a disclosure to the jury that she had offered a deal to this person to testify, correct?
Correct.
And he testified, and unfortunately, you were still convicted.
Right.
And she knew that he didn't have any evidence. Is that what you're telling me?
That's correct. So basically what that is, Barry, and I think you being an attorney would have to agree with me, what she did was she was suborning perjury.
Having said that, did you file a grievance against her?
We didn't. We tried to. I talked to Miss McQuaid, Barbara McQuaid, the United States Attorney, and when that happened, that was when all the everything was popping up against Kwame, and my complaint was basically pushed aside. So, that being what it is, what I told you, what I described about what the prosecutor did in my case, as far as suborning perjury, in my opinion, that is a fact. It's proven. It's proven in federal court.
Okay, I didn't ask you this, and I think it's important to know. Did you go to jury verdict?
Yes.
Okay, so how many jurors sat on your case?
12, 14, then the 2 were eliminated. And I'll tell you, and I'm glad that you asked me that question, Barry, because
I wanted to talk to you about that.
Because this is another thing that we found out. During the course, the first vote of my jury was 10-2 to acquit. 10-2 to acquit. Right after that first vote was taken, Judge Schwartz had walked into the jury room, stuck his head in the jury room. He told the jury that he thought I was guilty. The next day, the jury foreman was switched. Vote came back guilty on all counts. That's a fact.
In federal court, did you have a jury trial?
No, we reached an agreement out of court.
Okay, and that was after all the proofs were in, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so
I really wanted to go to trial. I knew that we had them dead nuts. But this is another problem that every exoneree faces, okay? When you come out of prison for something you didn't do, you have nothing. I didn't have a penny to my name.
you have no roof over your head.
No.
We talked about that. You can't get a bridge card. You can't get Medicaid.
No.
You can't get it. Well, today you can because they just changed the law in
Right,
the state of Michigan.
right.
In the past week, that felons, people who were being charged with felonies, can get benefits while their cases are pending. You know, they just changed that law last week.
I'm aware of that, yes. But, you know, that, as I said, I wanted to go to trial, but the stress, not having any money, the stress of sitting through these depositions with the police officers, some of them lasted 10, 12, 14 hours, as well as the assistant prosecutor. I was going crazy. It got to the point, and thank God I had George Ugazian and Tom Holler with me, because when they tried to, the attorneys for the police and Clinton Township itself were basically trying to say it was my own fault that I got convicted because I had a court-appointed attorney.
Okay, let me ask you an important question. If this compensation law passes,
hmm
are you going to have to prove that you're entitled to compensation all over again?
It may come to that. What everyone would have to do is you go back to the trial court, first of all, get a letter from the judge who declared you innocent. You take that statement from him, go to the court of claims, and then the claim will be processed.
Who declared you innocent?
Well, in my case, it was Judge Michael Servito, who, with the help of Gail Pamikoff, who was a pro bono attorney on my behalf, proved beyond any shadow of a doubt that I was totally innocent based on the DNA results.
Okay, so we have to take this step by step for our listeners.
Right. Each case will be handled on an individual basis.
Hold on. Number one, you have to prove you're innocent.
Well, you do, but if you're already on the streets, someone who's been on the streets and released from prison, their innocence has been proven, whether it's a DNA case or a non-DNA case.
No,
Such as
what I'm talking about, if you want to go forward, you have to be exonerated first to go forward to get your compensation. don't
correct.
you?
That's correct. Yes.
So you have to be exonerated.
Right.
So if you've been tried and convicted by a jury
Mm-hmm.
and they used, for lack of a better term, trumped up evidence, you have to go back before the trial court or another judge who's assigned to the case if your judge has expired,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to get exonerated.
Correct.
And if you get exonerated, then you can make a claim under the new law that's going to come into effect in Michigan, correct?
That's absolutely correct. Yes.
Is there a time limit for making the claim?
Once the law is passed, okay, a person will have 3 years from the date that the bill is signed into law to file a claim.
Now, if you've been exonerated, are you required to come in and prove anything beyond the fact that you've been exonerated in order to make a claim?
Well, one thing you might have to do, let's say, for example, someone was working when they got arrested originally prior to their being wrongfully convicted. And I'm sure if someone has a job and they have pay stubs or records from the taxes that they paid, you could find out how much money you lost during the years that you spent wrongfully imprisoned, and that could be added to the total of the state compensation.
I know you've really taken this new bill apart. We're going to take a break for a minute. When we come back, I want to break this bill down so people understand if you've been exonerated, you have a right to come back in if the legislation passes. We believe it's going to pass.
I do.
And make a claim, but we have to break it down in terms of how you present that claim, whether you go to court, whether you present that claim through a committee, a panel, how it's done.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's take a break for a minute.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
I know it's very difficult for you to talk about some of these issues, and I want to apologize, but I have to break these things down.
I understand. I'm glad that you do, because I want all of your listeners to, clearly understand just what we're trying to do and exactly how the law is going to work.
Okay, so we're all praying that this law gets passed so that we come in line with the majority of states and the federal government. You understand that?
Yes, and please keep praying, everybody. Keep praying.
We're all on the same page when it comes to being exonerated. You have to be exonerated by a judge in order to go forward.
That's correct.
If you do that, and the legislation passes, for each year that you've been incarcerated, you're entitled to make a claim for how much money?
Under the current proposal, it's $50,000 a year per year for every year of wrongful imprisonment. So for someone like myself, 10 years times 50,000, that's $500,000.
Okay,
There's no cap whatsoever.
here's my big question. You make your claim, it's $50,000. Do you make that claim in front of a panel, a commission, or do you go directly to court?
The way it would work, each individual would go back to the trial court where they were wrongfully convicted, in front of the judge who declared them innocent. They would get a statement from that court, then they would go directly to the Court of Claims to file a claim with the Court of Claims.
And they would get a maximum of $50,000 a year.
$50,000 a year. So it's, if you're in for 10 years, as I said, it's $500,000. Someone like the Hires brothers for 20 years, that's $1 million. It's still, in my opinion, Barry, no amount of money can make you right for living, for going through hell in prison.
I don't believe that anybody who's a victim of any kind of accident or injury or detention ever gets full compensation.
No,
That's
I agree.
That's
I
my
agree.
personal
Yep.
feeling, because their life's not only been put on hold, but everything in their life stops besides your life being put on hold.
Sure.
You can't work. You can't, like, your father passed away while you were in prison. How do you put a value on it? You can't put a value.
You can't. And I'll give you another example. My friend Walter Swift, right here from Detroit. Walter spent 26 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. Okay? When he went in, his daughter was 1 year old. Next time he saw her and I was there when he walked out of prison, when he was released in Detroit a number of years ago. How can you possibly compensate somebody financially for missing 25 years of your daughter's life? You can't. You can't put a price on it. But you have to start somewhere, and that's what we're trying to do.
Now, in your case, you showed me the composite picture, and you showed me the picture of the individual
Right.
who was convicted, correct?
Right.
But when he was convicted, he wasn't convicted of the crime that you were charged with, was he?
No, and that's another pet peeve of mine. A number of years ago, for many years, Barry, there was a 7-year statute of limitations on being charged with rape.
Now there's no statute of
Now there's no
limitations.
statute of limitations. However, and that law was changed just over the last few years, and since I've been home, and I was been pushing for that. Okay, when that law was passed, I mean, I've learned so much about how politics work in Lansing. When that law was passed, our state reps and our state senators left a 12-month gap before that law took effect. Okay. Well, as it turned out, the person who was responsible, who committed the rape that I went to prison for, he fell into that 12-month gap. So in layman's terms, what that means is we know who committed the rape. We know that he committed the rape. The DNA proves that he committed the rape, but he cannot be charged for that rape.
But he was charged for.
He was charged for. He had a during the years that I was in prison, he was on the streets committing other crimes. Okay, the crime that he was committed of, and if you have any young kids watching the program, get them away from the TV. This man was married. Okay, he had an 18-month-old daughter. His wife was working. She came home early from work one day. This man, this pervert, and that's giving him a compliment, in my opinion. He was sitting in front of a computer watching pornography, playing with himself, while his 18-month-old daughter was sitting on his left knee.
So she turned him in.
The wife turned him in when she came home, and thank God she decided to come home early from work. Otherwise, he'd still be on the streets.
So the most important thing to start out this process, if you're going to prove your innocence, is proving that you are not the person that they believe committed the crime with identification, correct?
Right.
I saw the picture of the man that committed the crime. He's jolly faced. He's about 6'2", 220 pounds, correct?
He's 6'6". As a matter of
6'6". I
As a,
didn't
mat-
realize
as a
that.
matter of fact, Barry Scheck, who from Cardozo Law School, who actually founded the Innocence Project, he believes that my case is the worst case in the country of misidentification. When I was arrested, I was 5'10", 43 years old, 185 pounds. This guy got arrested. As a matter of fact, he was arrested the day before this crime, the rape actually was committed. The police let him go. Anyhow, I'm 5'10", 185 pounds, 43 years old. This man, the actual rapist, was 6'6", 290 pounds, 30 years old. So they were only off. The police, in their wisdom, were only off by 8 inches and 105 pounds.
And do you know if this man's in jail today?
He isn't. He's serving a prison term of 10 to 25 years for that crime that he committed when his daughter was sitting on his knee.
And that's the only punishment he's going to get, is it?
Unfortunately, he can never ever be charged with the crime that I lost 10 years of my life for. And it doesn't make any sense to you. And everyone listening should be outraged by that.
Now, the thing that you and I were talking about, and it's really, really hard to understand, is we watch a lot of movies on TV, we go to the show, we see about people in prison, but it really doesn't compare to what you went through, does it?
It doesn't. You know, people ask me, not only me, but my fellow exonerees, when they meet us, at this event or that event, they will say, geez, we're so sorry, we don't know what to say. And my response to them is, you can't. You cannot know what it's like unless you walked in our shoes for all those years behind bars.
Innocent victims of crime get compensated, but innocent detainees never really get compensated because you're no different than individuals that are being held captive during a war.
You're absolutely correct, and there are many times I will, I'll use this point. Okay, as I said earlier, I have all the respect in the world for our men and women, our servicemen. Okay, oftentimes they go through post-traumatic stress syndrome.
And they get
Same
paid
thing.
lifetime benefits
Right.
if they prove it.
Right, and exonerees don't. And you think about this too, Barry. I love all our veterans, okay? They did the right thing. They did a very honorable thing by volunteering to go into the service, into the military to serve our country. I can tell you this right now, none of the exonerees, including myself, woke up one morning, walked down to the police station or the prosecutor's office and said, can you put us away? Can you put me in prison for 10 years? They volunteered, we didn't. We were convicted by a broken criminal justice system. I can't be any more plain than that.
Well, you know, in prison, you met other people who were actually innocent of crimes, but they wanted to go back to prison because they had a better life in prison than they had in the outside.
Sure.
Because when they came out, there was a stigma. There was identification. That's a felon.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fellow who's been in prison. That's a lady who's been in prison. And you're not getting any benefits. You can't get a job. You can't get food. You can't get shelter because nobody wants to help you.
Right. We can't, an exoneree cannot get the benefits that someone coming out on parole get.
So people sometimes feel they're better off on the inside than the outside because at least they've got a roof over their head.
And they have something to eat.
And they're around people they're familiar with.
Right. And if you look at someone like Jamie Peterson is the first person that comes to my mind. Jamie did 19 years in prison for a rape and a murder he didn't commit. The DNA cleared him, proved who the actual rapist was. His case is similar to mine. 19 years. I had him over my house 2 years ago for the Super Bowl with all the exonerees of Michigan, and he told me, Kenny, I want to go back to prison because he couldn't get any. We finally got him SSI benefits now, but it took almost 3 years. But he had no place to go, no family, nothing. And he told me, Kenny, I want to go back to prison. And I said, Jamie, I don't ever want you to hear you say that. I mean, the Michigan Innocence Clinic, myself, there were a lot of good people were involved, and it took us years to prove his innocence, but we did it.
One of the problems that we're faced with today is that convicted felons come back to an unforgiving society.
That's true. And, you know, someone once said, you know, you can judge a society by how that society treats its prisoners or its inmates. And those words are true. You know, let's face it, Barry, there are a lot of criminals out there, okay? A lot of good people out there. A lot of people got bad breaks. A lot of people were set up, okay? But if someone is convicted of a crime, I'm talking people who are actually guilty and they're released on parole, they're entitled. They paid their price. They paid the fine. They paid their dues. When they come out, give them a chance to start life anew. It's the right thing to do.
Well,
it's the right thing to do.
As I said, up until recently, they couldn't get a Medicaid card.
Sure. You know, I can remember myself and Walter Swift, because after Walter was out, he went through the same problem that I did. We had to go through hell just to get a driver's license.
Okay, we're going to take a break for a minute. When we come back, I want to talk about the do's and don'ts and how to protect yourself.
Okay.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the show, because you're giving our listeners an opportunity to prove innocence before conviction. Is that correct?
Basically, yes, that's true. And if someone does go through the unfortunate experience of being wrongfully convicted, and if we can prove their innocence, we want to help whoever we can.
And in the last segment here, I ask you if you would share with us on what our listeners and their families can do to help their friends and their families if they're charged with crimes to prove their innocence, correct?
Yes, he did.
Okay. Now, Bill Proctor and you have worked on some programs together, correct?
Correct.
Tell our listeners what you've done in this arena to help other individuals prove innocence.
Well, as far as Bill Proctor goes, who is a very dear friend of mine, which you know, Bill formed a group called Proving Innocence. I ask every viewer to visit that site, provinginnocence.org. Okay, I'm proud to serve on the board of directors of that group. But you can go to that site if you know someone that is innocent and you need some help. You can contact us through that website. We'll be more than happy to provide investigators, many who are retired FBI agents who want to do the right thing. If we can help you, we will. But you have to go to the site first. And another good thing about the site, if you go down to the bottom of the page, there's a picture of myself along with Angelo Henderson, who is a radio show host here in Detroit. Angelo Henderson and myself and Richard Bernstein did a radio program for about a year called Fighting for Justice. And that show had to stop because of Richard's position now with the Supreme Court. But if you click on that site, 10 dates will pop up. And Richard and I and Angelo had picked out the 10 best shows that we thought we did, talking about wrongful convictions, what needs to be done to correct them, okay? How either Proving Innocence can help, or the Innocence Project can help, or the Michigan Innocence can help. The help is available, believe me.
So
just ask for it.
Give us some bullet points now on what we should be doing to prove our innocence.
Well, if you happen to get arrested, I think I touched on this last week, give the police officers your name. By law, you have to do that. Other than that, ask for an attorney. Be quiet. If you need help, as I said, you can contact us through Proving Innocence, or you can write to the Thomas M. Cooley Innocence Project in Lansing. Okay, 300 Thomas M. Cooley Law School, 300 South Capitol Avenue, Lansing, Michigan, 48901.
And Barry Scheck helped start that program there, didn't he?
Barry Scheck is the original founder of the first Innocence Project in New York City, and that was in 1991. It's and you know, Barry, to this day I'm miffed as to why Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, who founded the project, I can't understand why they haven't won a Nobel Prize for the marvelous work that they're doing to free innocent men and women in this country.
Okay, now we've got these sites down, but after telling someone that they should not volunteer, listen now, not volunteer any information to the law enforcement agency other than providing correct identification so that they know you are the person that you claim you are.
That's correct. Absolutely correct. Ask for an attorney and keep your mouth shut.
Now, when you get an attorney, do you have a right to determine whether that attorney is capable of representing you?
Well, that's a very good question, Barry. Many times when someone is arrested, they don't have, and the record, I mean, the cases prove my point, really. Some people don't have the mental capacity to know whether they are getting good reputation or not. It's a sad fact, but it is a fact. It's true, okay? And you probably won't know if you're getting good representation until the final results come in. But you know, a lot of the cases involving wrongful convictions involve court-appointed attorneys. I know here in Michigan, in my opinion, there's not enough funding to provide for good representation for court-appointed attorneys, or even for a court-appointed attorney to petition the judge to get money for an investigator to counter the claims of the prosecutor. It's a near impossibility.
Okay. If you're going to prove your innocence, you need to have the case investigated, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that becomes a real priority, doesn't it?
It does. And, you know, the prosecutor, they'll have carte blanche, they'll have a blank check to spend as much money as they want to bring in their supposed expert witnesses to try to nail you to the cross, the defendant to the cross. If you're a court-appointed attorney, you have, as I said, it's a near impossibility to have it, to retain an investigator. In my opinion, Barry, the scales of justice should be equal.
Let's stop for a minute because you're saying some very important facts here. Let's back up. Court-appointed attorney has a right to petition the court so that your case is investigated, correct?
You're absolutely right.
And you can insist upon that, can't you?
You can, if you happen to know how the game works or how the law works, yes. But I agree 100%. You're right.
Okay, so tell our listeners they've got this right then.
Well, everyone does have that right. I agree with Barry 100%. If you happen to get arrested and you are not happy with the attorney that the court gives you, you have the right. You have the right to go in front of the trial judge and ask for a new attorney.
But you also have
You can file a grievance against them also.
You also have the right to request funds to have an investigator work with the attorney on your case.
Again, you are right about that, but that is a near impossibility. It doesn't happen very often, Barry.
Well, let me give you a real harsh example. You're charged with first-degree murder,
Mm-hmm.
and you say that you're not there at the time of the murder.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You don't need to spend as many dollars if you've got a whole group of people who can positively prove that you weren't at the crime scene, but you were at church.
Well,
Let's start there. And your minister says, well, he was sitting right in front of me in church, and everybody else knows that you were there, and they've got a video of the church service, and you're there. You don't need much of an investigator for that, do you?
no, but that reminds me of one case in particular, and Bill Proctor touched on this last week, the case of Temujin Kenzu. This man was wrongfully convicted of a murder that took place on the campus of Port Huron Community College. Okay? At the time of the murder, and this is all a matter of the record, and this is one of the cases that really gets my dander up. At the time, this man was murdered in Port Huron. At the time of the murder, Mr. Kensu and his pregnant girlfriend were in Escanaba, Michigan, 460 miles away, in the Upper Peninsula. They were there for 3 days. His truck had broke down during that and had to wait for a part. This is a fact. This is a true case. It took them 3 days to get the part for the truck. During those 3 days, they stayed at a Holiday Inn, which is right next door to the car dealership. They ate every day at a Big Boy restaurant, which is next door to the dealership itself. 17 people signed that Mr. Kensu never met. They were all workers at these 3 businesses. Signed affidavits. Mr. Kensu was up here at the time of the murder. That man has been in prison now for 32 years.
And they have no proof.
But it's an indication of, so you have eyewitnesses, okay? The system is so dishonest.
But you have to start by requesting someone to investigate the case.
Right, you do. And I'll use my case as an example. Mr. Markowski asked for $500 from the trial judge, okay, for an investigator. $500. Denied. So then what do you do?
Well, the law's changed since then, but because there's a higher priority in having investigation today if you ask for it, isn't there?
Well, somewhat, but that's due to people like myself and fellow exonerees and people like Bill Proctor from keeping pressure on out in the public, keeping this matter in front of the public, in front of our lawmakers, so that laws can be passed that would provide that much needed help.
Well, you know, I remember recently going out on a case. I had a criminal case, and the fellow said that he didn't commit the crime, and I went to the bar where allegedly his former girlfriend ran after he beat her up, and I got to the bar and talked to the people in the bar, and they said they locked him out.
Mm-hmm.
And the girlfriend was inside bleeding. So I understand. I confronted him with it. And he finally said, well, we had a fight, but she started it. You know, it's a little different situation. The point I'm making is that every attorney has a responsibility of representing their client, and that includes a duty to investigate.
You're absolutely right. I wish every attorney would have the knowledge and the decency and the heart that you do to fight for people that need the help.
I want to thank you for coming today. I'm going to have you back again.
Okay?
And next time you're going to come, it's not going to be next week because we're going to wait until the legislation is enacted, and then I want to come back and discuss the legislation with you. How's that?
Sounds great. And before I go, I want to thank you again for having me on here. Detroit, I love you. I was born and raised in the city. Let's love each other, please.
Thanks again for coming, Law Power Hour. We'll see you next week.